Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. This episode is a previous recording of our live Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer series, where a live audience asks questions of professional Scrum trainers. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Scrum.org Ask a PST session, where we are going to be talking about how to be effective in the coaching stance. My name is Leslie Morse. I'm on staff with Scrum.org, and I'm really pleased to be joined by two of our PSTs today, Stephanie Ockerman and Steve Traps. We will get quick introductions from them very shortly. And in case you don't know about Scrum.org, we are the home of Scrum, founded by Ken Schwaber, who is a co-creator of Scrum. And we're the home of where professional Scrum trainers thrive and live, right? Our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems, and we do that through the use of Scrum. And it's not only about training. On the Scrum.org website, you'll find tons of resources that you can use for ongoing learning, thought leadership in terms of the Scrum guides and the Nexus guide and the EBM guide and other things that we've published. And then we've got our assessments that provide the leading certifications that are out there in the Scrum plate or in the Scrum global Scrum community. My words are getting all tangled, y'all. I'm excited about this conversation today. Coaching is a topic that I'm super passionate about, and I'm excited for us to have a conversation about how coaching can help us enable professional Scrum within the world. So without any further rambling on my side, Stephanie, can you tell us just a little bit about you, when you became a PST, and maybe how you discovered coaching, just to help people orient to where you are in your own journey?
Absolutely. So my name is Stephanie Ockerman. When did I become a PST? I needed to prepare for that. I honestly couldn't even give you the year. I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And time is, as we know, a little bit wonky lately.
Yeah.
So I run an agility enablement business called Agile Coach. And I do focus a lot on training, because I think that's super foundational. Love the professional Scrum training courses. And there are also additional things we need to bring in. And so I do, in terms of my discovery of coaching, I really resonate with the Scrum Master role. I've played all the roles, and there's certain aspects of my personality and skills that I can bring to all of the different roles in the Scrum team. But I really my heart is with the Scrum Master role. And it was through kind of my path of being a Scrum Master, realizing, they talk about this thing called coaching stance and facilitation and other, they talk about these different things and being able to teach. And so I realized that where I really needed to grow was likely the coaching skills. And so I went down a journey. I did some research, talked to some people in the Agile world that I really respected and knew had kind of those coaching skills about their journeys, and ultimately went down the path of doing the 5-course training series through proactive coaching. And I was pretty much hooked from the beginning, and really dove into whoa, this is a whole bigger world than I thought it was. Again, it resonated with me. I would say not even just with the Scrum Master role, but in life. I could see a lot of possibilities from it. So I kind of went down a deeper dive, and I continue that journey today, because there's so much more to continue uncovering. And so that has led me to trying to bring that into the work I do. So creating some accessible resources, some content, online video-based training to kind of help Scrum Masters who are I don't really need to invest in full-on professional coaching training to be able to understand what coaching can be and what it can bring. And so there's something a little bit more than just Scrum, just teaching, just facilitation, other Agile practices. I think coaching is something that just you layer into everything. So that's kind of been my discovery and my journey.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Steve, what about you?
Well, I've been a professional Scrum trainer at Scrum.org for 4 years now, coming up to 5, I think, and it's just whizzed by, like Stephanie was saying, what year are we in, and so many years have merged into one, and it just does seem crazily. So I've been a Scrum trainer for 4 or 5 years now, and love it. Love helping people to work in this complex world. My background before that, though, I was a developer, working in those problems of when can we have this, and all those complex areas. And being a trainer, being from a software background as well, often I'd find myself just going, why is it so hard to do things? Why is it so difficult? Why can I not answer these questions that are reasonable questions? And why do I feel so bad about this when I can't do this? So naturally, I was leaning towards the Scrum Master role, and as Stephanie was saying about having the skills of a coach, I really wanted to explore, what does that mean? I'd say I'm a Scrum Master, but there's an aspect of skills which is coaching. I had never in my career up to that point really gone into anything about coaching. I'd seen people do coaching, or what I thought was coaching. And then going through in a similar route to Stephanie, the coactive, and there are other coaching places out there as well. Just Stephanie and I both went down the same route, probably for the same reason. And within the first 5, 10, 15 minutes of being on a course and experiencing coaching, it was like, wow. It was like going through the looking glass. It was just like, what is this world that we've got into? I felt quite comfortable being part of the Scrum world and being a Scrum trainer. Then all of a sudden, what is this place where I'm exploring feelings, I'm exploring why I get triggered certain ways, why I act certain ways, and how I can help other people find similar kind of things out for themselves to be the best that they can be, to fulfill their potential. And that is one of the great things about being a coach. It's linking into what Stephanie was saying about being a servant leader. It just helps people reach their potential, and we'll have a conversation along the way, and we'll learn something and we'll move on. So I'm relatively new to being a coach, a formal coach. I've kind of been doing it for a long time in my career, because a lot of people I've worked with is often supporting them and helping them. It's like, okay, what can we do to help move forward? So it kind of naturally fitted together.
Yeah. Before we really get into this discussion, and already I see some people dropping questions into chat. Lindsay, who's part of the Scrum.org staff, will help us be monitoring the chat and any technical support. But if you really want to make sure your question comes up in the queue for ones that we'll explore with Stephanie and Steve, please be sure to put your questions in the Q&A feature, because as the moderator today, that's really what I'm looking at as I pull the questions that we'll be asking them. And before we get to those, because there's a bunch of really good ones coming in already, let's talk about the word coaching for just a minute. Sometimes we joke in the Agile universe of capital A Agile versus lowercase Agile, and how those words are different. We're kind of talking about capital C coaching here. When we think about the Agile coaching competency framework, right, in the book, Coaching Agile Teams, that Lisa Adkins published, I guess, about 21 years ago now. And coaching, being one of the 4 kind of primary stances: coaching, teaching, facilitating, and mentoring. The word coaching in this instance is inspired by what is known as professional coaching, right? The discipline and the code of ethics and the competencies and the skills of professional coaching, right? Most notably defined by the International Coaching Federation, ICF, or the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, EMCC. So when we're talking about coaching, that is what we really mean today: the professional coaching skills and how they influence the way we show up as we're Scrum Masters or Agile coaches or product owners or Agile leaders. And when we are choosing intentionally to bring those skills in to how we serve the people, teams, and organizations that we're working with. So just want to root in for a minute what we mean by coaching. And both of you sort of alluded to in your introductions that as you study professional coaching, it inherently impacts who you are as a person, and you start sprinkling in coaching skills and coaching techniques to like all of the ways that you work. But one of the things that I really appreciate about the use of the word stance when we think about coaching is that you are forced to make the intentional choice. Given the situation I am in right now with this individual or this team, I am going to choose to have a coaching conversation or choose to be in a coaching stance because that will best serve this situation. How do the two of you decide that that is the right move to make in any given moment? Like, unzip your brains for us and kind of unpack that decision-making logic.
Stephanie, do you want to go first, or I just realized a bit of a hospital pass? But
oh, I love it. I love it. Such a big question. So it's like, how do I make that decision? Well, okay, so for me, a lot depends on. So let's assume I'm a Scrum Master. There's different roles I can be in. So if I am a Scrum Master, part of a Scrum team, let's start there because that's probably the majority of people are or have been or will be in that situation. I'm really looking at establishing, like, where is this team today in their journey, and where are the individuals that are part of that team in this journey. And then a little bit of organizationally, right? We do have a service to the organization, but I am probably starting with individual and team and understanding like what's going on in terms of the development of the team's identity, right? Like real cohesion there. And that, of course, is going to impact the team process, but that's kind of another aspect of like, are we delivering value frequently with quality, right? Like are we getting it done frequently? And then the team identity is like, who are we, right? And do we like really like own this? Are we like operating as a team that cares about and measures our success by team results? So those are a couple of the things that I'm looking at to see like where are the challenges. And so if I see that especially the team identity aspect is really not been growing, or maybe just attention hasn't been put there, or things have changed and we've gone backwards, that is typically a sign more in a coaching, more of a coaching approach, a more formal coaching approach. So that's like one example of like how I make that, how I decide. And I also want to point out, people can be in different places, right? So like there's the team and then there's the individuals. And so I'm always looking at the different levels is kind of a word I'll use to call it. I coach at the individual level, I coach at the team level, and I coach at the organizational level, which is still made up of individuals, right? So sometimes there are individual one-on-one coaching conversations I'm having. I shouldn't say sometimes. Often there are, and I will tend to establish that with team members when I join a team or we're starting up a team. If making sure we have that place so that we can always have a coaching conversation available to us on a regular cadence, and making it clear to them, like, what does it mean when we're having these conversations? Like when I am part of your Scrum team, and when we have these conversations, I'm coaching, and here's what that means. And I do the same when I'm working with certain key stakeholders. So sometimes I'll have those relationships where we'll have one-on-one coaching conversations with certain managers or other key stakeholders as well, depending on my role in that specific instance. So that's one example of like, I'm a Scrum Master, and I'll go ahead. I have other examples that we could share, but I'll go ahead and toss it to you to see if you want to add to that or bring in another scenario.
Yeah, it's similar kind of style as yourself there. What I tend to do is look, one of the first key lessons that I ever learned was reveal, not resolve. And it was like, okay, there's this issue here. Folks, what are we going to do about it? And then when you get the blank faces back, it's like, okay, so now there's a conversation we need to have here. How do we move forward? I could tell you that you need to version the API. I could tell you because that's from my experience, but it might be wrong. So what are we going to do? And through the exploration, through coaching, it's like, okay, what's the best thing we could do here? I don't know. Well, okay, so why do we start using some of those skills, powerful questions? What do we move forward with? What are we trying to achieve? So you have those conversations, but also you're picking up on those subtle non-verbal communication that you're getting from people. Active listening, the three levels of listening. Are you actually listening to your own voice just coming out, or actually you're listening to what they're saying and thinking, oh, I'm going to respond this way, or are you thinking actually, okay, yeah, taking it all in, absorbing what's going on and the dynamics of the team. So it really depends on the situation, your relationship with the team and the organization, to when do you take in going between the different things. There's a book that I'm reading at the moment, the Badass Coaching or something along those by Robert Gallion.
Bob Galen's new book.
Yeah, and he talks about switching between the stances, between the skills, quite rightly, because we're going from one to another. And if you were coaching somebody at a C-level area and you're saying, well, how does that make you feel? That kind of thing. And they may push back on this and say, what do you mean talk about, I don't want to talk about feelings. I just want that problem solved. So then there's that aspect of, okay, well, we're going to come a different way and we're going to be maybe a bit more consultancy. We're going to do a bit more advisory, but we're going to still be going through to the actual, getting through to the nub of the problem that we're trying to solve and help that person see that problem as well, as opposed to think it's not my problem to worry about. So picking on what Stephanie was saying, it depends on the situation that you're in of when to switch, but it just comes with a bit of practice, and you can tell when it falls flat because it falls flat, and you just go, oh, okay.
The one thing that I didn't quite hear you all say, and this sort of relates explicitly to one of the early questions that we had come in from our participant, Daniel Cohen. He said, what's your approach to shifting in real time between coaching, mentoring, advisory, teaching, right? All of or facilitation maybe, right? In these different stances. One of the things I didn't hear you say as you think about those in the moment choices is, to practice coaching ethically, you must get consent from the person you're coaching. Like, is that okay with you? Or else you kind of are just sort of doing sophisticated psychological manipulation of someone. So as you think about sort of not just being coaching inspired, but really choosing to have a coaching conversation and navigation between those different stances, how does that work in a skillful way, knowing that you want to do things ethically?
Yeah, the way that I've done that in the past and seen it dramatically fail as well is just saying, hey, can I ask some questions? I'm curious. Inviting people in to either say no or yes, or that kind of thing, but having that, hey, I'm curious, I've got some questions, is it okay if I ask them? And because then that invites you in. I was working with somebody who was coaching a team and they didn't have that permission they hadn't gone down that route for whatever reason, and the team was really reluctant to be coached or to have coaching conversations, and it was they didn't want it. So it was never going to happen until we asked for that permission. Hey, is it okay if I ask some questions? And go from there.
Yeah, and that's actually what I meant by establishing regular conversations. Part of that is the education around what is coaching and asking for the consent. And one piece I want to add to that is what I found was very, very tricky, especially before I actually got trained in coaching and got some more tools and things to work with, and also just more confidence, is having a very explicit discussion around confidentiality of what is said, and making sure that I'm not using something somebody told me in the one-on-one coaching call and dropping a bomb in a team working session that it does not, that's the ethics aspect of it, right, Leslie? Yeah. And also clear with managers of the team around what is going to be confidential, what's not shared, but what does need to be shared because of my responsibility as a Scrum Master, right? What I'm accountable for, what the rest of the team is accountable for, what that manager is accountable for, what their role is, because not every manager's role is the same. And so I always make sure that I have a very strong relationship with the manager of the team. And I've been lucky in that it's usually the same person, not a lot of different managers. But really being able to help that manager understand I need you to trust me and I need you to trust the team. And like, how are we going to know what that line is around when I come to you with something? And also making that clear to all of the individual team members, because I don't really want it to be me coming to a manager, right? Like it all depends on context of what the situation is. But like kind of it, again, taking responsibility and ownership, like encouraging others on the team, right, to bring conversations to managers first, in that situation. So yeah, like I think that is an important aspect, is to educate on what we mean by coaching. And to Steve's point, you might realize like, oh, I kind of need a coaching conversation with these people over here, and we haven't established that. Right. And so that might be a little bit of an in the moment. It might feel less formal, but you can do a quick little education on like, look, here's what coaching is. Here's why I think this is a helpful approach. Here's a quick little designed alliance is a term you'll hear sometimes, from different coaching education institutes. But you can do that very quickly, and in a way that I think honors transparency and the ethics of that.
And it's also not fixed in time. Once you've got that designed alliance, that agreement, it's not there. That's what we said when we never really experienced coaching. It's what does the person need from you as a coach? As a coach, you're there in service of that group, that individual. What do you need from me right now? I need you to tell me exactly. Well, I may not be able to do that. So this is why it's an alliance, what we both can do. But just picking up on what you're talking about, the ethics is brilliant, but it can also be such a pain in the bum as well. Because it's that, it's always be honest, because you can't remember the lies that you've told sometimes. So it's just easier to always tell the truth. Or to always be honest. Ethics does this thing, the same thing, very similar. It's like, I can't do this because it's going to either bring my professional reputation to question, or there's a perceived conflict of interest. I can't do it. Or I'm going to have to stop you there, because this is now going to put this relationship that we've built the designed alliance around in a bit of a questionable place. And without those ethics, it's like, whoa, where do you go? How far do you go? Well, that depends on the coach. But with ethical, having that code of ethics in place.
This is where the merger of the profession or the discipline of kind of professional coaching and being an agilist, right, which you might serve as a Scrum Master, and the collision of these two worlds starts getting really complicated in terms of being effective. So I'm sort of merging a couple questions that have come in here through chat, one of which I just answered by quickly typing, which is a Scrum Master always a professional coach? And it's like, definitely not. Right? As a Scrum Master, you are going to borrow from and choose to use professional coaching skills at certain times. And if you go study professional coaching and really want to, you're not always a professional coach as an agilist, like making that distinction. So if we think about coaching and how one of the key aspects of it is that you are agendaless. Well, if you are an agilist or a Scrum Master choosing to apply professional coaching skills, you are doing so in service of the macro agenda of agility, right? So deciding, like, if someone on a Scrum team that you're working with comes to you with a topic that they would like to be coached on that is inherently anti-agile, how would you effectively navigate sort of the desire for them to be coached on things that are not in pursuit of that macro agenda around agility or professional Scrum?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is, right, there's also this level of not making assumptions, right? Like not assuming that it's non-agile. It might sound like that on the surface to me, right? But like that's where one of the coaching skills, I think the most challenging coaching skills that we have to bring in, it's hard to even call it a coaching skill. It is, but it's also just a general life skill, is self-management. So I got to manage, like my brain just went to all these different places. So I've got to self-manage that, and I got to go back. I got to stop judging, right, and making assumptions. And so I guess I would get myself into that place and explore what is really wanted here, right? Because and this is true whether it's saying something may sound non-agile on the surface, or just anything that does sound agile on the surface. A lot of times what people say they want isn't really the underlying want, right? Or it's like what they think the end result's going to look like, but maybe there's another way to that, right? Like there's lots of ways that conversation can go. So like that's my starting place, is like getting myself into non-judgment, openness, curiosity, like bring the curiosity and uncover, right? Like without judgment, without assuming, no leading the witness, like the bringing in all of those skills to like start unpacking. And then I think from there, then maybe you see what emerges and see what feels right.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Stephanie. You've got that self-management and it is so difficult sometimes as well to linking into that self-management, because of the experience of being a Scrum Master, and you try and piece things together, and you've just got to stop. Otherwise, you're not coaching, you're leading. Hey, this is the answer. It's over here. Just look over here, there, and it's that being that non-judgmental. Don't make the assumptions.
Yeah. And, just to add in there, if that conversation does lead us down a path that this is not really in alignment, right? Then, okay, now that we understand, we've unpacked it, now we can name that, right? Like we can say, like, do we see how this is not in alignment, right? And, maybe that's like, oh, okay, that's what this person needed to understand. And then now create a new way forward. Or maybe there is like okay, but this isn't for me. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that's one of the things I really love about really bringing in a coaching stance, and that neutrality that comes from it, and the pure curiosity, because it is a wonderful vehicle for creating empiricism, right? You built the transparency that, right, this thing that they're really wanting for themselves, maybe it's not in alignment with what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Now that you have that transparency, you can choose to then look at that and decide what you want to do with it. Versus just sort of gloss over it and make it go away. And it sort of becomes this underlying impediment that we're always dealing with, sort of.
Yeah. Or just that person's just always having an internal struggle. They can't say a certain thing, right? Or, and that's not helping anything. And just to make it a little bit more tangible, like just some examples that come to my mind of what we're talking about is like, it could be like a team member realizing that they don't want to really be part of this team. And I'm not saying just because they're like not agile, right? But like there's lots of things that come into play. There are certain ways people prefer to work. They might also just be done. Right? And I've been in situations like that where there was a lot of assumptions about a person on the team. And it was like, hold up, like let's work through this, right? And eventually that person did move to another team, and that involved a lot of coaching with the individuals at the team level, in our working sessions together, and aligning around the work we were doing, right? But also with that person's manager. And eventually it was like, hey, and I don't even think it was about Agile or Scrum. I think it was like a ready for something new, because I've been working with this technology, this product for many years, right? So we don't want to make assumptions. And so that's one example, but another could be product specific, right? Like a direction we're going with the product, right? And somebody's got realizing I don't really think this is the right direction anymore. Or we're realizing we have partial information, or we have biased opinions that are taking up more space maybe, and because of a power dynamic, right? That's another product specific thing where that this conversation we're having reminds me of as well. So it's not only about some people think of it as how people feel and their mindsets. It's there's mindset, but there are very tangible working together delivery ways this happens too. Business strategy, right? Like how many organizations had to deal with like, oh my gosh, what strategy are we doing? Are we taking our business now?
Yeah.
You know, in the last couple of years. So like, just to kind of make this a little bit more tangible, there's lots of different ways this conversation applies in the real world.
Yeah.
But how brilliant though, this is me being incredibly selfish, how brilliant it is for us as a coach to have actually helped that person move on or see something differently or get a different perspective. Because, oh, it's not for me, or we're going in the wrong direction. It's like, okay, so let's explore this. What would the direction you want to be? Well, I want to be in that team over there. Okay, what would that look like? And it's just, you help them grow, you help them reach their potential.
Yeah, and that conversation, by the way, they might not even know that. And
No.
it might take months to actually uncover that's what's really happening, right? Because we don't always know why we're experiencing, you know, like the resistance or just like whatever those feelings are inside of us, right? And however it's showing up in the dynamics of our relationships with our team members, like that people don't always know right away.
That's actually, that word resistance is, I think, one of those great sort of like, look for the flashing sign. How do you know when you might want to choose to use a coaching stance when you're experiencing resistance with people? Because if people are resisting, like, you could just teach them why you should do it this way, but you're just feeding them more information, right? Or you might mentor them on why it's been successful for you, or you might facilitate a conversation, but really that experience of resistance is like, there's something going on within them that's holding them up. They have to discover for themselves what's going on, so then they can be open to new ways. And so the indicator of coaching might work could be resistance, is one of those things you might look for. The way you've both been talking is you're describing to me, at least, a little bit of like some of the mindset of being in a coaching stance. And that was one of the questions, is like, what is the mindset shift that happens or that is needed in order to be effective when coaching? Can you just kind of put a couple words to that?
I don't have the answer you're looking for. That's my mind shift. I've not answered your question, but that's kind of like, okay, there's a problem. You've come to me with something that's causing you sleepless nights, or, you know, a bit of discomfort there, some resistance. Okay, I don't have the answer, but we can explore and we can see what's going here. And it's one of the hardest things I struggled with is, again, I'm a fixer. And this is the journey that I went through. I'm a fixer, I'm a pleaser, I'm all those kinds of things, all those things that hold me back a little bit. And it's like, I'm so used to actually giving people the answers that they're looking for as some great sage or whatever, and go, go this way. And it's not actually, that's not up to me to give. I'm here to help work in partnership with you. And so the mind shift is moving from that, here's the solution, go implement it, to, okay, talk to me about this. What does this feel like? Why are you feeling this word? You want to go with this? It's more of an explorer approach than here's the answer, away you go, I've given you my magic kind of thing. So I probably belittled the whole process by a lot, but that's where my head went.
No, I totally agree with that though. It's like, the moment like ideas are popping in my head and I'm like, but I probably should go in this direction. Like, how do I lead them in that direction? Like, it's like, no, self-management, non-judgment, get into that mindset, right? And it's always hard, right? Because we do have an accountability as a Scrum Master. And I've talked about this before in some of like the mini workshops I've done, and I talk about it a lot in the coaching program that I just wrapped up recently for Scrum Masters. Is we are accountable for outcomes that we cannot control. And this is that like balance that we talk about with the Scrum Master role, like, where if your team falls apart when you're not there because you've been, you know, moving all the parts around and telling people what to do and solving all the problems, and, you know, like, that's not success, right? So like, that also ultimately means I have to be okay with them not changing. like, or like not changing in the direction I think they should, or right. Like, so it's like, yes, I'm here to help us effectively deliver reliably, like valuable quality products. And right, like I also can't control the outcome of that. And so I actually think that once you accept that, and don't, and it's like a thing you have to like accept every day and in moments, like, because it's a constant thing. It's like once you embrace that fact and are like, yes, I have a tangible end goal here, right? It's ongoing, right? But it's tangible. I can see the results. But I'm here for the people. I'm here for the systems, right? Like the relationships that are here. And so at the end of the day, if we fail to deliver, but I can say that I showed up and everybody here grew because of it, then I can call that a success, right? And also like, it's not a judgment of my worthiness if at the end of the day, somebody doesn't want to be coached. And that doesn't make them a bad person, and it doesn't make me a bad coach. So it's like that's the mindset game, I think. And it's not like oh, I got there, right? It's like an ongoing thing, and you're going to catch yourself spinning and being like, oh, I messed up. We're going to mess up when we're trying to stay in more of a coaching stance. We're going to realize because we got reactionary and we didn't take a moment or maybe several moments and like actually observe what's happening before we started moving forward. So you gotta own the mistake, right? And clean up any mess and take a new approach, right? So like that to me is like the additional, like, get behind what Steve said. It's like that, this is the mindset to me that helps me stay in that I don't know the answer. And my answer that I think I know might be wrong. This isn't about me.
And a belief that the people you are coaching do have the answer, right?
Yes.
That they are creative, resourceful, and whole is
Yes.
one of the like co-opted sort of phrases that, you know, whether or not you've studied with coactive, lots of people use that. Like I must believe that they are capable of figuring this out on themselves. Because if I hold them in any other way, I'm going to continuously sort of project my version of reality onto them.
Yeah, you're not helping. You're actually hurting them, because if you're saying that this is the way for, and they won't grow into the full potential of that person. If they've, and you know, all through our lives, we're told this is the right answer, you know, because this is, do this, do that, go to university, you'll get a good job, you get a good house, you're not, that's the path.
Yeah.
But it's a totally different world.
Yeah, this give me the answer thing, right, is a classic thing that we face just like in helping organizations and teams get good with Scrum. Like just install it for us so we can do it. Which brings in a little bit of the employee versus maybe contractor or consultant, like the way we are engaging with the organization that we work with. Because sometimes, especially if you're a consultant or a for-hire Scrum Master or Agile Coach who's using a coaching stance, like the client thinks they're just paying you to give them all the right answers. So using a coaching stance can be hard. So how is it different when you're an employee of an organization versus a for-hire team member? Do you use the coaching stance differently, or do you approach it in a different way?
So I will say that I am not an employee of any organization and haven't been for so long. That time was before I really dove into the coaching journey. So to be honest, I haven't been in that situation. But what I can say is that I have very specific language in the agreements and also just in the conversations that I have when I do engagements with clients. So I do typically come in very much like from that coaching stance, and we talk about what that means. And I talk about my process of like, sure, like we're going to teach you some stuff. Sure, we're going to do facilitation to like help people, you know, make decisions and move through things. But you own your agility journey. I'm here to give you some structures and some support, leveraging skills that I am going to mostly be in a coaching stance. And here is what that means. And so that is something that I make very explicit.
Yeah, I was just thinking, actually, oh, I'm very similar to Stephanie, but from that whole coaching, but there was a period of time where I was an employee and a coach, and that coach, I don't know what I'm doing this for, that coach aspect. And it never actually occurred to me until you asked that question, Leslie, the fact that, was it any different? And I can honestly say, no, it wasn't, because I was still me. And I turned up and it was like, okay, I'm a professional Scrum trainer, I'm a professional coach, I'm a professional father. I'm still me. And I wouldn't be me if I changed the way I approach, because at the end of the day, I'm wanting to move that organization, that person, that team into a better place. Might not even get to the end, but does it make a difference? And for me personally, it didn't make a difference if I was being paid a salary or I was just being paid, a contractual rate. Hey, who has a job for life now? We could all say that we're just passing through organizations.
That's a good point, Steve. Like, now that as you're talking through that, like when I think about, I worked for a consulting company, right? And then was at a client, and that's a similar dynamic of you're managing that you're an employee of this consulting company, you have a client wanting certain things, there's an agreement, like above you or around you that you sort of control or don't control or may have been involved in or not involved in. And I'm relating now that it is like a very similar experience around, like, I'm me still, and like I was going to piss people off, quite frankly, around what I felt was best for the teams I was working with, around making sure transparency was there and whatever issues were coming up, that we're not hiding this, like whether it was coming from the client side, whether it was coming from the consulting side, right? And so I felt like I was me, and you can manage those things that on the surface can feel like conflicts of interest, or that can feel scary, to tell the truth or to stand up for something that, you feel is important.
Yeah.
But I think as coming into this word of professional, we have to say what it is, because otherwise come back to ethics, are we doing something wrong that could impact our profession, either indirectly or directly, or a conflict of interest there or not? It's that whole word professional. It's professional Scrum, professional coaching, professional whistler. It's doing it to that standard, doing it to that right level. If not, why are we doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those aspects of kind of doing it ethically and doing it professionally, we mentioned earlier, was that kind of getting consent. And so Jack Brady and then Michael McCarrier both had sort of related questions around like getting teams to buy into or consent to being coached, whether it be a team or an individual. So one, maybe some quick tips, because we're starting to get short on time, quick tips on helping teams embrace the idea of being coached, as well as if that resistance like never goes away, is that going to impact them in the long run?
You can't coach somebody that doesn't want to be coached. And I've witnessed that and seen it. And if they don't want to be coached, they don't want to be coached. But that's fine. We can still be friends, and we can still talk, and we can still get on. The best, one of the biggest tips is just be yourself. Be that human being and connect with people. And it's through those connections, build up that rapport, build up that. There's nothing scarier than, we've got this coach coming in, and everybody goes, well, I best act totally different because I'm being assessed as a coach. So no, just be, we want to build up rapport, just connect on the human level, and then we'll ask some questions. And if people don't want to be coached, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. And just to add to that, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
And try not to put any judgment around it too, like beyond not taking it personally, but like not judging, like, well, this person's a good coachee and this person's got some resistance. It's like, no. Like let's take all that away. This person is who they are, and I don't know their entire internal world. I don't know their life experiences. So who am I to judge. Like, so really, trying to come at it with that neutrality is a word you've used before. But I think we get up in our heads around like, oh, like I have to have consent. It's pretty simple, right? Like give a very quick, there's a lot of definitions you can use out there around what coaching is. Leslie, I'm sure you're going to share some links around like what Scrum.org has put together. And, something that I talk about is like, it's a thought-provoking and creative process where like, it's about enabling people to make intentional choices that align with what's important to them and what they want. Right. And it empowers them to feel like leaders in their own lives. Right. Like those aren't the words you have to use. You can find other words, and make your own, whatever feels good to you, and be like, that's what this is about. And so when we're doing this, like, let's talk about confidentiality. Right. Like I want to be really clear on that one. And talk about what accountability looks like. Right. So like, what's your preference? Right. Like, do you like in terms of how you want to be held accountable? And that can sound scary too. So maybe that's not the word you want to use. But around like, hey, like I'm going to ask you, there's times that like, do you want me to hear you? Do you just want like to be heard? Right. Or do you want me to help you bottom line things and like cut to the chase? Like, how are, like, what's your preference? And you can have those conversations. You can ask those things up front as kind of part of that formal establishing of a relationship. Or you can ask it along the way, right? Like you might have a very simple consent type of, hey, here's what coaching is. Here's the confidentiality of this conversation. Here's the purpose of it. Here's how it fits in the wider context of my role as a Scrum Master and how I'm showing up in this way for these conversations. And then you can get to know them and their style as they go. And don't be afraid to ask. In fact, I encourage you to ask when you're wondering, right? Versus just like, assuming you know what motivates somebody or their learning preferences or, how they like to be, if you make a request of them, like making it very clear that you can always say no. Like this isn't me as your boss telling you or a team lead telling you like you have to do this, right? So being really open with like those types of things. It can start as that simple conversation and then you layer in more around your agreement to understand how you're going to work with people, and it can look differently for the individuals on the team because we're all different.
But just to echo what Stephanie was saying, it's stressing the fact that the person you're coaching is always in control. They don't give you control as the coach that hey, you can stop, you can start, you can do whatever. You're in control. We're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, we might ask, how do you want to move forward on this? I'm going to send them an email. I'm going to go for a drink with my mum and talk about things. I'm going to do, okay, cool.
Yeah. And I think what you're highlighting here reminds us like, all of these things are the reasons coaching is not the only stance you use.
No.
When you are a Scrum Master, when you're a product owner, when you even have a job title of Agile Coach. Even if you are called an Agile Coach, you are not always using a coaching stance. There is a giant Mary Poppins bag of an endless set of tools and techniques and skills and stances that you could be drawing on in order to effectively help people and teams solve complex problems.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like there's obviously some skills within Scrum Master, like that. Hey, the developers don't want to do the daily Scrum anymore. Like, you could go into a coaching stance as a Scrum Master and go, well, so why, and it's like, hey, we're playing the game of Scrum. We need to have a daily Scrum because this does this, this, and this. It's a teaching stance. It's we need to make sure it happens with the manager of the process. So I probably wouldn't go in a coaching stance. I might afterwards. And talk about the why and where's the value and all those kinds. But it's hey, we're playing Scrum here. We need to make sure this happens because otherwise this will happen.
And I like that example, Steve, because there's like, I mean, in your experience, you've probably seen at least 10 different reasons that whole we don't want to do the daily Scrum comes up, maybe 50, right? So like it depends on like what's driving it. Like, are there other things I'm picking up on, right, that point me towards like, oh, we're feeling resistance, right? Back to that word. Maybe it feels like individual resistance. Maybe it feels like there's a funky team dynamic happening here, right? Like I'm sensing an energy, right? Or this is a pattern. what's going on, right? And then I might need to go deeper in leveraging a stronger coaching approach to uncover that, right? Create transparency, surface what's really going on, so that they can find a way forward. And I might have to bring in a little more teaching. I might have to bring in a little more like, hey, here's some facilitation skills we can use.
And you might have to bring in some mentoring and going, hey, from my experience,
Sure.
when we did a daily scrum every 3 days, do you know what? We missed our sprint goal. And, I got shouted at a lot. That's the difference between mentoring and coaching is from my experience, do this.
Yeah.
So.
One other thing, so we did a Scrum Pulse in April, I think, with a couple other PSTs that talked about sort of their own journeys in like becoming professional coaches and a little bit of how they use professional coaching skills with the people, teams, and organizations they serve. But I think and this has come up in a variety of the questions, it's like, how do you actually get better at this? And what does professional growth look like? Because both of you happen to have trained with the Coactive Training Institute, CTI, and the Coactive Training Program. Stephanie, you're also investing in organization and relationship systems coaching, also known as ORSC from CRR Global. There's hundreds of other coach training schools out there. But coach training schools are really expensive, really long, journeys. Like that's a significant investment. And not everybody has that financial privilege or time privilege. So if you want to get better at the coaching stance and you don't have that money and time, what are some of the things you can study? How can you practice? How can you really deepen your own skills so that you can be effective when using the coaching stance?
For me, it's I read a lot. Well, I listen to Audible a lot, so lots of the books. So it's just picking up those skills, picking up that knowledge. Radical Candor, I've just been listening to by Kim Scott, just how they phrase questions and actually have those difficult conversations with people that sometimes we all back off from. There's the actually Michael Bungay book, Habits of just there. So just going through this, I don't get any money for it, should, but just talk about the different styles. So it's just get a book, start exploring, start talking to other coaches and see how they've done it. And you don't have to go on a course. Often it's just reading, kicking around the internet.
Yeah, and actually it's the intentional practice, right? So read, listen, depending on the style of learning, right? Use different resources that meet your needs. And then you have to practice.
Yes.
One of the things, some people are better. Uh-oh, did I go away? Am I back?
You did for just a second. You said
some people
just practice.
Okay.
And then
and then magic happens. No, yeah. You've got to start intentionally practicing, and that can feel really, really scary. So, one of the things I did, because I went through this journey of professional coaching, and I said the exact same thing. I said, not everybody needs this level, but they need something. And so that led me to create an online course. So it's videos, but the workbooks are the key of like putting it into practice. You still have to do it, right? Like, nobody's forcing you to do it. You still have to be a self-directed learner. But what I found is that organizations have kind of bulk purchased some licenses for groups, and they have formed study clubs. Because when you practice something like this, it's helpful to have other people to talk to that are going through the same lessons. And so you could look in your organization and, maybe you're reading that book, The Coaching Habit, right? Or maybe you're listening to a certain podcast, related to coaching, and, or it could be an online course, video-based, right? And then get together frequently and talk about what you're learning, talk about how you're applying it. And also you could even do some true practice, like form triads and kind of get agreement that like, hey, we're going to practice coaching together. I like triads because we of course experienced them through our coach training. It's super helpful to have that observer, kind of watch and be able to provide feedback, but you all kind of have to be on the same page, right? About what you're learning. Because, somebody might give you feedback and it and this is actually true all the time, even if you're not learning the same things together, feedback is feedback, right? It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's wrong. That kind of part of the things we learn in coaching along the way. But like having some feedback, whether it's, right or wrong, doesn't matter, but like having that feedback is super helpful in the practicing. You're also going to get feedback by the responses of the person you are coaching. So like when you think you're in a coaching stance, notice them, right? Like whether it's with an individual, whether you're taking more of a coaching stance in a group, a team type of setting, like notice the reactions people are having. What is the responses? What's the energy of it? And so you can still reflect and do this on your own, even if you don't have other people doing this with you. But if you do have people, try to get at least kind of a regular conversation going, if not go to the extent of trying to do some practice coaching together.
Yeah. And if you're doing practice coaching, ask that person if it's okay to record the conversation, because the learning you can harvest just by going back and listening to it yourself and asking some of the questions, Steve and Stephanie, that you've mentioned today, like, where did I project my own opinion on them? Where did I notice I was being judgmental? Or different things like that, and just getting curious with yourself. You can learn so much from practicing there. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't say, like, the word coaching is really convoluted in our world because of the word Agile Coach and of the phrase Agile coaching. So you've got to be really discerning and intentional when you choose to study about the coaching stance, because the coaching stance, right? The use of professional coaching skills as an Agilist is not Agile coaching by itself. So if you're reading about things that are about Agile coaching, the umbrella term, only pieces of that are really looking at the true coaching stance that we're talking about here today. So Stephanie, you mentioned your resources and tools and things from the Agile Socks website that you've produced. Like, I would say, like, go look at the list of all the coach training providers by the ICF. Those coach training organizations have tons of blog posts and webinars and other sorts of things. Coaches Rising is one of the organizations that I find has lots of good digestible small pieces of information or webinar programs that really just dig into pure coaching skills. And then the question is, as an Agilist, how are you borrowing that in your practice as a Scrum Master or a product owner or a leader of some sort? Any other sort of references or recommendations on that? Because we've got about 2 minutes and I've got a couple wrap-up.
Find yourself a coach.
Yes.
It's, because I want to become a coach. Okay, so find yourself a coach, and there's loads of people out there offering the services. Some of people are doing it for pro bono and free, obviously the same thing. But put it out there. I'm looking for a coach.
Yeah.
And experience that. And that's how you can learn.
Yeah, we were talking a bit, as we were kind of doing our tech prep for this call, about how, like, once you actually, it could be either go to training, because really when you go to coach training, you're being coached, you're watching people be coached, but also just getting a coach, you are going to realize, like, oh, like, this is what coaching feels like, right? And like, it's hard to put into words. So just experiencing it. I love that, Steve, as a recommendation of, like, finding a coach, right? And yeah, I do want to find somebody who actually does know what professional coaching is, not just somebody who's calling themselves a coach. Like, I want it to be really clear, because there are, we've all seen instances, and honestly, we've probably been part of the problem at some point in our career before we really started uncovering it, right? It's just a learning journey, right? We all start where we are, but just experiencing it really does click. It's like that click happens for you around.
You then know what your client is feeling.
Yeah,
because you've experienced it yourself.
Yeah, and I think I wrote a blog post, or maybe it's an email newsletter I sent, about, like, if you think coaching is just asking powerful questions, it's not. And you can ask what on the surface looks like a powerful question in terms of it's open-ended, but you're not, right? So like start to observe yourself and notice, like, those types of things.
Yeah, awesome. Steve and Stephanie, thank you so much for being with me today, and for bestowing your wisdom upon all of our attendees. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. I'm going to do a quick screen share to wrap us up. So Stephanie mentioned this earlier, right? Coaching resources for Scrum and Agile practitioners, right? Scrum.org/coaching. We've got a definition of what coaching is. We've got coaching capabilities, links to other resources. I think some of the ones that we uncovered here during our discussion today would be great candidates to add to that page. So Steve and Stephanie, send me some of those and I'll make sure that we get them added. And then as always, right, tons and tons of resources and options to engage with the Scrum.org community. We've got our forums, connect with us on social, the blog, and then more Scrum Pulse sessions and other webinars and things on our events calendar. Like I said, attendees, thank you for being here. Steve and Stephanie, thank you so much. Truly appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then the recording for this will be up within the next 24 hours. You'll get an email that is available, and questions that we didn't get to, we'll handle in a blog post here over the next week or so. Thank you so much for coming today.